But first, yesterday's announcement that Australia's longest war is finally over, with the last troops home from Afghanistan by mid-year, is naturally welcome. No one wants to see our armed forces in harm's way indefinitely, and no one wants the expense of overseas military deployments. But that doesn't mean that they're not sometimes absolutely necessary for our country's safety. Indeed, how refreshing was it to hear new Defence Junior Minister and former Special Forces officer Andrew Hastie say with such clarity, the one job, its core business of the military, he said, is the application of lethal violence. Lethal violence to protect our country and Australia's values. Now, of course, the families of the 41 Australians killed in the conflict will forever be scarred by their loss. And from the PM down, we feel for them. Even though premature bereavement is the stark reality that every military family faces. That's why we owe them a debt we can never fully repay, those who wear our uniform and the loved ones that support them. But because Afghanistan now faces a very uncertain future and could easily revert to Taliban rule or worse, fall into a vicious civil war between the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, many will say that the whole Afghan enterprise was a miserable failure. But sometimes there are no good options. And the challenge is to find the least bad alternative. After September 11, the atrocity, we remember that well, the United States and its allies had to strike against Al-Qaeda, against the training bases and the sanctuaries in Afghanistan. Indeed, going back to Andrew Hastie, as he said before, watching those towers fall and the enormous loss of life that resulted from that, he was watching that from the safety of his university classroom. And that incident prompted him to join the army in the first place. Now, in Afghanistan, after the Taliban was removed, if we didn't want them just to return as soon as the coalition pulled the troops out, the push by the West to try and build a better government was worthwhile. Now, if not a liberal democracy, at least one that did not wreak genocide on its own people nor permit terrorism against our own. And given Saddam Hussein's consistent sponsorship for Islamist terrorism and defiance of UN resolutions, there was a strong case, wasn't there, for the invasion of Iraq and Saddam Hussein's removal. The pity is, so little thought had been given to what then came next. The desire of two presidents, Donald Trump and now Joe Biden, to end the forever wars reflects our reluctance to put sons and daughters at risk and our absolute right yearning to spare anyone the horrors of war and premature death. But will we always be free of the dreadful challenges that our grandparents and great-grandparents routinely had to face? I don't know. Much as we'd wish it otherwise, I'm not sure that's something we can count on. Indeed, if you're a student of history, you'll know the odds are against that sort of optimism. Equally, I have to say, I'm not so sure we know how we'd cope. Cope as a nation with the need for military sacrifice on a large scale, given our safety-first mindset, largely displayed and reinforced by this pandemic. It's worth remembering that from a population of just over 5 million, Australia lost 60,000 in the Great War, including 1,500 in a single night at the Battle of Fromelles. In my own family, my great-grandfather and 5 of his brothers fought overseas together, predominantly on the Western Front. From a population of just over 7 million, Australia lost 40,000 in World War II. My grandpa here was wounded in New Guinea. As a nation, we lost nearly 400 in Korea and nearly 600 in Vietnam. Not dead of natural causes, but killed in combat. And as we grieve the losses in Afghanistan, as we should and must, my mind always turns to the state of our national mood in those more distant times. The stoicism of families, the way the country pulled together and dug deep in ways so few of us have ever had to do today. Never again is always our instinctive response. Yet, what if the world doesn't give us that luxury? What if the threat to our way of life and our freedoms comes for us again? Have you pondered that? Have you pondered that? What if? We certainly can't assume that the threat of Islamist terrorism has gone forever just because of the sacrifice of military lives in faraway places that have largely kept it at bay for 2 decades. Not forever, though. The past few years in Europe, particularly France, shows us how real that threat remains. Who's to say that Australian forces won't ever be required in the Middle East, as they were in very large numbers in 2 world wars, well before any of these more contemporary conflicts? We can't assume either that a great power conflict is a thing of the past. Almost every day, China is rattling its sabre against Taiwan, a vibrant democracy of 25 million people, effectively independent, who have a right to resist forcible incorporation into a brutal dictatorship just because China wants to claim them. America's tired of being the world's policeman, and who can blame them? But America is all that stands between the people of Taiwan and their subjugation into China. What if America summoned us for aid, as Britain did long ago to help defend Poland? Do we have our forebears' strength and stoicism? Let's hope we never have to find out. But you've got to wonder, given our modern nervousness about free speech, lest it offend anyone, and readiness to throw people to the wolves, reputationally at least, if they offended against some new madness of political correctness, just how strong do you think our national character is these days? Most of us want to think the pandemic has tested us, and in part it has. But compared to what those who came before us have faced, this pandemic wasn't that much. What keeps me awake at night is the prospect that more severe tests are coming our way, and my worry that we're just not the sort of people we once were. Now, I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong. But I fear if we can't even defend Australia's values, how on earth can we hope to defend our country?